On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, you have questions. I have answers to questions, including, is the tank going to kill the culture?
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, March the 4th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. It's free to join. Great place. Come hang out, talk ball among friends all the live long day. You can also, of course, subscribe for free to the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. QR code on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on audio, you can go to the link in the description of the podcast and sign up for free. All you got to do is drop your email into a bar, and all you'll get in return is a bunch of really good emails 5 days a week where I'm writing about your Toronto Raptors. Wrote about Emmanuel Quickly and his big surge against the Orlando Magic on Sunday for Monday's newsletter. Going to do a little more mailbag answering in the mailbag newsletter today, so you can go and check that out. It's a lovely thing. Please support. And on today's show, I mentioned it, it's mailbag time, baby. We're taking questions from you, the little sickos in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Again, always the best place to get questions into me for the show or for the newsletter. We've got questions about whether the Raptors can be the Pistons of this year, next year. LaMelo Ball, and good God, please stay 100,000 feet away from that, please, Toronto Raptors. We'll get into a question about him. Wandering eyes regarding coaches. We'll get into that too. But let's start off with a question that's kind of top of mind right now, considering what's gone on in the last couple of games for the Raptors. Of course, the hilarious collapse in the game against the Bulls on Friday that the Bulls should not have indulged. They should have, just as the franchise that needs to lose games probably, should never have taken the bait. Instead, they go on and win that game. The Raptors lose kind of in embarrassing fashion, and yet it was an extremely clutch loss if you're counting the tank standings. And of course, they nearly lose to the Magic as well on Sunday. Jakob Poeltl minutes restrictions, playing lots of rookies. Orlando Robinson getting heavy run. What does it all mean? Here's a question from Jay Rich, a lovely, loyal listener of the podcast, and a former over-unders winner as well from a couple of years back. Jay Rich asks, how much do you think the players on a tanking team, driven by the front office, of course, react to decisions that affect their abilities to win games? Do you think there's a fallout tied to those situations? And how aware are they of what is happening? First of all, I think the players are very aware as to what's happening. I think all these guys are plugged in. Everyone has access to the lottery standings. Everyone knows how the league works. A lot of these guys themselves were high draft picks. They know the deal every single year. And look, I do think on some level, this is something that gets hand waved away too much by the tank heads, by the sort of front office, ruthless team building heads, where it's like, you don't got to worry about culture. You just get talent, and talent will defeat culture. I think, we're going to talk a little later about LaMelo Ball as an example of how talent can sometimes not overcome culture. And we will dive into all of that a little bit later on. But I do think it is something that gets hand waved away a little bit too easily from those who are like, just tank, sit your guys, doesn't matter. Like, I do think it matters. I also think it matters how you do it. And obviously, there's a lot of it that goes unsaid and kind of is behind the scenes and stuff that we're just never going to be privy to as outside observers with, in my case, very limited media access. I got some, but if you ask them about tanking, if you ask the players, hey, are you guys on board with this? If you ask the coaching staff, hey, you're tanking, right? They're not going to give you a straight answer. They're going to tell you, well, we want to win games, obviously. Tanking's for losers, blah, 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 blah. That's what you want to hear in the public forum from the coach and the players. I will say, like, Darko this season, I think, has done a really good job of towing the line and just kind of saying, this is development year. Every time he's asked about wins, losses, who's playing, all that stuff, it's a development year. This is always a rebuild. This was always year one of a rebuild. And I think he's been very dutiful in sticking to that party line throughout the season. It doesn't mean that's the same conversation that's going on behind the scenes. It doesn't mean this conversation is being ignored behind the scenes. Maybe they're not talking about it. Maybe it's just this like untalked about elephant standing in the corner of the practice facility that no one is referring to, but there has to be at least some communication, some understanding of what the Raptors' plan and intent is here, because that's just how like a workplace works. You're not going to have like the two biggest parts of a workplace not talking to each other about what they're doing and whether they're going to be on the same page. As much as it is very much front offices who set the wheels in motion for teams to tank and lose, I refuse to believe that like the coaches are kind of in the middle, kind of doing their thing, obviously managing up, but trying to give the best, place for players to play and go and compete. And the players are going and competing, and there's just no communication between the upper levels and the players. It just seems pretty unfeasible to me. That seems like a pretty unhealthy work environment, if that is in fact what's going on. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think the Raptors are handling it about as well as you could for now, right? We'll see what happens down the stretch when they play the easiest schedule ever conceived over a 20-game stretch of basketball. It's comical how easy the schedule is down the stretch. The Raptors could try to lose a lot of games and still win more than half of the games that remain just because the teams they are playing are experts in sucking out loud. But like, I do think the Raptors are so far doing it as quote unquote the right way as possible. This is not the Utah Jazz, who have essentially just told Lauri Markkanen to take a hike all year. He's played 43 games. He might get to 50 by season's end. I don't know what's going on with him injury-wise. I'm sure there is some real injury going on. But if this were a serious, non-shameless tank franchise in Utah, I have a hunch Lauri Markkanen would be playing more than 43 games up to this point in March. Just a hunch. Again, I could be totally wrong on that one, but I don't think I am. The Jazz have been pretty clearly shameless about this tank all season long. The Wizards too, right? The Hornets eventually have kind of fallen into that bucket of really unserious teams as well. It just seems like what the Raptors are doing, where they're still playing their guys reasonable amounts of minutes. They're not riding them 40 minutes a night. They're not playing Nick Nurse ball. They're not trying to go optimize every single lineup combination or stretch within games. They're tinkering and toying around. Oh, let's see what RJ Barrett looks like with 4 bench guys right now. Oh, let's see what like Jacoby Walter looks like playing with Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley and Jonathan Mobo. And like, they're kind of playing a little bit of lineup roulette, a little bit of just kind of throw the dice, see what you got, and see what sticks. They're not, again, optimizing every single minute, every single possession in the interest of winning every single game. But, I don't think they're being so blatant about it outside of the minutes restriction thing with Yak, which I don't think is going to persist the way it has. It's just my hunch. Like, I think the way that they handled Emmanuel Quickley is very much mirrored the way they've handled Jakob Poeltl coming back, and Quickley's playing 30 minutes a game or more than that now. I'd guess that Yak will get some closing time at some point here. Maybe that comes at the expense of RJ Barrett closing games or something like that. We'll have to see. But I don't think the true thing that's caused the last couple of games being a late game disaster for the Raptors has been Jakob Poeltl sitting out down the stretch. And I don't think that's going to persist to the same extreme degree as we've seen since he got back and he's been on the minutes restriction again. Maybe I'm wrong, but if we're going by what they recently did with Quickley, it seems like it's following a very similar course where it's like a slow scale of minutes day by day. And I'd bet by the end of this week, he's probably playing closer to 30 minutes a game, even though I think they're still going to prioritize getting Jonathan Mobo his run and stuff like that. All that is to say, right? I think every tank job's different. Everything is all relative. The Raptors don't seem, they do earnestly seem to be trying to kind of have their cake and eat it too. There's obviously the Scotty Barnes 65 games thing. If he makes all defense or all NBA this season, he gets a gigantic pay raise. He gets the 30% max as opposed to the 25% max. I think they're going to let Scotty Barnes, as long as he's healthy, try to play those 65 games. I think he can only afford to miss 3 more, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's going to be hard for him to get there. Like, they're going to have to play him and throw him out there. But I think it is in the interest of kind of keeping your dude happy. And look, I don't think he's going to make all NBA or all defense. He might have an outside shot at all defense if the Raptors close really strong and kind of pad their numbers on the season by punking a bunch of really bad teams. The full scale numbers for the year will look pretty good if that's the case. There's an outside chance there. I think the Raptors kind of owe it to Scotty to at least give him a shot to do it. Otherwise, that's the kind of thing that can certainly kind of bleed into the culture and take away from the good vibes and make this thing hang around a lot longer than the next 6 weeks, which I think everyone kind of seems to be on board with. Yeah, like, there's going to be some pain to close this year. It's not going to be the most competitive environment, but they're also not full on yet, mind you. They can still do this, but they're not full on like throwing in the towel and benching everybody and playing Jacoby Walter 38 minutes a game in the interest of trying to maximize every game to lose, right? I think they're doing an all right job of keeping balance. And I do think there's also something to the idea of like this tank this year is a little set apart from, say, what the Jazz are doing or all these teams that just kind of, all right, well, we live in the lottery and every year is like this hopeful thing and there might not be an end in sight. If we get lottery luck, maybe. But even then, if you get lottery luck one year, you're still probably like, well, we could probably use one more high pick, huh? Till we really start to hit go on this thing. The Raptors are not in that position. The Brandon Ingram trade changed the calculus of so much for this team. And they are going, in theory, to be competitive next season. We'll talk about that coming up in just a second here. But like there's an end in sight. There is light at the end of the tunnel that the Raptors are currently traveling through right now. And I do think that probably softens the blow for your Scotty Barnes, for your Jakob Poeltl, for your RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, to know like, okay, like, yeah, this is just a brief, like opportunistic dip into the bottom of the standings and something will come out of it to help benefit the team going forward. There is, of course, the interesting wrinkle of like whoever they draft in theory high in the draft is likely to be one of their replacements long term, which is always the sort of unspoken thing about draft lottery jockeying and tanking that is a very interesting and very real thing that hangs over all of it. Again, it's something to watch down the stretch of the season for sure. I don't think it's totally bled into the point where it's a disaster or you're at risk of soiling the vibes forever or anything like that. More games like they had against the Bulls, you get 3, 4, 5 more of those, and maybe you start to risk that. I also think they're going to continue to kind of keep rolling their guys out, give them a shot to win games, probably play Pert a little bit more, and just kind of, strategically throw in rookies and stuff like that. Maybe it's not like Darko coaching to lose at the end of games, but just sort of not coaching to win, passively coaching, not advancing the ball here, not calling a timeout there, not using the challenge there, stuff like that. I think we'll probably see that. I think overall, players are aware of what's going on. And if there's not conversations happening behind the scenes to kind of inform what's going on, that feels like a problem. All told, it seems like most people are kind of on the same page with this team at the moment. So I'm not too concerned about it just yet, but it's certainly something to monitor down the stretch, and a very good question from Jay Rich. We'll come back on the other side. We will get into next season. What's in store for your Toronto Raptors? Is a top 6 seed in store? I think it's very possible. We will get to that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in an NBA game during the 2024-25 regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Look, we're moving into March. You may recall last year, March and April, this is a time where guys who otherwise don't have tons of opportunity get a whole lot of shots up. Malachi Flynn scored 50 points for the Detroit Pistons in a game last year. He's back with the Hornets now too, baby. Maybe he's going to go bring some of that Mickey Mouse March magic back to the table, and Malachi Flynn is going to earn you 50% off an order the next day. That's a fun thing to think about, isn't it, for the Charlotte Hornets? Boy, oh boy. Tell me the Charlotte Hornets stink without telling me the Charlotte Hornets stink. Signing Malachi Flynn. Hopefully he can score some 50 burgers at some point and score you 50 burgers in the process. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point NBA game on eligible orders. At participating merchants must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. And of course, tip your drivers and do it handsomely, like I am. Back at it here on your Tuesday mailbag edition of Locked on Raptors, as we continue to field questions from the sickos in the Locked on Raptors Discord server, the piggies at the trough, as I like to call them affectionately, and they love to be called piggies too. Next one here from Midrange Assassin asking, you think we can be the Pistons of next year? Can they be a top 6 to 3 seed with Ingram, the incoming rookie, and the current promising roster? I do. Maybe I'm a homer. Maybe I'm Ingram pilled. Maybe I'm Raptors pilled. Maybe I'm Masai pilled. I don't know. I just think you look at the Eastern Conference, man. And I've talked about this throughout the season. This is, I know, been a thing that like Matt Devlin and Jack Armstrong have talked a lot about on the broadcast throughout the year as a means of, top-down coping for the people who are watching the games every single night, but I do think there's some legitimacy to it. Look at the Eastern Conference, man. The Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons are comfortably the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference. And look, the Pistons have been awesome this year. A wonderful story. They're tryhards. That's always going to win you regular season games. Malik Beasley is having an absolutely out-of-body season for that team. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been way better than he was during his last couple of years in Dallas. Tobias Harris has found the fountain of youth. They just kind of have a lot of pretty effective basketball players. There's no one going to knock your socks off. Even Cade Cunningham, I know he's probably going to win most improved because, reasons. I think there are other guys who are more deserving. He's very similar to the player he was last year. He just kind of has more usage and so higher counting stats. But in terms of efficiency and stuff, pretty much the same. But look, the efficiency is not like incredible or anything. But Cade Cunningham has been enough to guide a team that is in the top 6 of the Eastern Conference. I think with what the Raptors have as a team, just the combination of a lot of pretty good players, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in a bunch of pretty good offensive creators, amplifying one another, building possessions with advantage into bucket, that I think is going to turn the Raptors into a pretty good offense next year. I think Scotty Barnes has proven this season he can be the basis of a pretty good defense when he's on the floor. They continue to defend at a top 10 rate this season in Scotty Barnes' minutes. When he's off the floor, it's a different story, but there are ways to go and address that and fill in. And I just think a lot of it's going to be internal development. I think, Jonathan Mobo, Jamal Shed, Jacoby Walter, all guys who have two-way potential, guys who can defend. They're still rookies. They're still screwing up a lot because that's what rookies do on defense. But I have a pretty high belief that those guys are going to be able to drop into lineups and add some defensive potency around the offensive guys the Raptors have. And again, you're looking at the Orlando Magic, who look a total mess right now. And yes, there's no Jalen Suggs, but their offense has still been miserable all season long, even with Suggs. And yes, they've had injuries basically clouding their entire season, except for the first 5 or so games when Paolo Banchero was going nuts. But like, that team is in dire need of an offensive infusion. And I'm not sure that your Kobe Whites or Anthony Simonses, the guards who kind of get thrown around as guys to land in Orlando, are good enough to totally transform what that team does. They can improve them some, sure, but they're a really dynamic guard away from figuring things out. And it's hard to find really dynamic guards. You can find reasonably dynamic guards. You can find all right guards. Kobe White, Anthony Simons, probably in that bucket. Simons, by the way, one of the worst defenders alive. How does that affect the Magic's defensive potency if he's, kind of letting stuff by at the point of attack? They can probably cover for it, but that roster's weird. I don't buy the Magic as a team that's like a no doubt long-term top 6 perennial team at this point in time. The Miami Heat look like a disaster since trading Jimmy Butler, and they're just less talented than they used to be. Maybe the Khalil Ware and Bam Adebayo duo at some point, turns into something more and can kind of be a floor raiser and give them a top 6 floor. We'll see. I still think they're pretty limited talent-wise after the top 4 or 5. And then, they're starting Davion Mitchell. We've seen starting Davion Mitchell means your team loses a lot of basketball games. Just kind of how it goes. The Atlanta Hawks, I just don't trust the Hawks to ever figure it out. They will be the Hawks in perpetuity until they're not. The Chicago Bulls, not a good basketball team. Whoever they take in the draft this year is not going to make them good next year. Maybe it helps them long term, but I just don't see how the Bulls are anything but what they've been the last few years next year either. And so you're looking at those 4 teams, all pretty jumpable in the standings. The Nets, they're going to be a long-term build thing here. And the Sixers, boy, oh boy, the Sixers are as screwed as any other team in basketball. If Joel Embiid can't get healthy, that guy makes $69 million in 2029. That's a big deal. The East is gettable. Milwaukee is not this sort of perennial, no doubt title contender anymore. They're old, they're creaky, and they might be kind of in the swan song era of what that era has been. We'll see. Obviously, the top 4 I think are very good. The Pacers, the Cavs, the Knicks, and the Celtics, all excellent. I'm not saying the Raptors are going to go bust into that category of the Eastern Conference necessarily, but can they be Pacers adjacent? I think it's totally possible. They just have a lot of pretty good players, and they're a team that tries hard, and that is a recipe for regular season success. Does it mean much for the playoffs? That's what it's all about. Get to the playoffs, see what you got, and then you figure things out from there. I do think they absolutely have the recipe to be a playoff team next year. We'll have to beat out the Pistons, that is, no doubt. You never know. A team might take an injury and kind of have their season fall off the rails. That happens all the time, though. All the Celtics and Knicks and Cavs are pretty insulated against one big injury, which is a big deal. Either way, I think the Raptors themselves will be more insulated against big injury next year as well. Like obviously Jakob Poeltl hangs over everything. If he's going to miss half the season for some sort of injury, then that throws things out of whack because they're so Yak dependent. But assuming a regular run of games for him, and even if Ingram misses some time because he's missed time in his career, I think they have the pieces to fill in behind. And we've seen this just be like a pretty normal, kind of just below average basketball team since the start of January, with a lot of good stuff going on. You get internal growth, you get more time played together, you get Emmanuel quickly for more than 20 games. All of a sudden, like, things get a little bit interesting here. So yeah, I think top 6 in these next year, certainly gettable. I don't think the Pistons have are like chiseled in pen, chiseled in stone, written in pen as like a no doubt top 6 team next year. They're probably going to either lose Malik Beasley or pay him a lot of money, as he's likely to come back down to earth and not be literally Reggie Miller like he has been all season long. Like, that feels like it can't sustain. Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to be gone. Tobias Harris will be in a walk here. Like, there's no guarantees with anything here with the Pistons. So much of their success has been derived from these veterans who've been awesome, and their contributions are a big open question mark going into next year. They're going to need their young dudes to really pop. Jaden Ivey's going to have to come back from injury and look really good. Asar Thompson is great, but he's going to have to figure out how to shoot. Same with Ron Holland. Like, there's lots of questions there that right now the veteran guys are kind of papering over. I think the Raptors, you look at the roster top like 1 through 12, the Raptors can argue they're a deeper, better team going into next season than the Pistons as it stands right now. Obviously, the Pistons have cap space this summer. They can go do some stuff. They maybe should have been in on the Brandon Ingram thing, frankly. He would have been a really nice piece for them to kind of bolster what they've got going here. Either way, yeah, top 6, I think, to answer the question, in short, 100% they can do it. Is it a guarantee? No. Are they more likely to be like a 7 seed? I think that's certainly probably where you'd pick them to finish if you're just picking the most likely spot in the East for them to end up next year. 7th, 8th, something like that. A nice positive step forward. But top 6, 100% on the table in this Eastern Conference, which is just so easily scalable compared to most conferences at any point in time. We'll come back on the other side. We got a couple of quick ones to rattle through. We got one regarding Darko Rajakovic and whether there's any way in which the Raptors would move on from him going into next year. And then we'll talk about LaMelo Ball. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at OpenPhone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of different hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls all day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number, and that's where OpenPhone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. I am someone who has struggled with this, like, genuinely keeping my work and personal life separate. It's all done on one phone for me. I'm a freelancer. I don't get work phones. And so this has been a challenge, having one place where all my work stuff can be, and then I keep the life stuff separate. What a beautiful thing. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you can get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA for 20% off 6 months. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers, guess what? With another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. That's a big deal. Go check them out. Wrapping up the mailbag here on a Tuesday, where, again, we got questions in from our Locked On Raptors Discord. Always the place you can go. If you want to drop me a question, we have a mailbag chat question in there. Or mailbag questions chat in there. You can just drop them in there, and I'll heart them. I'll remember them from next time and put them in the queue, in the hopper, as it were. A couple quick ones to fire off here before we wrap things up. From Muggsy, asking, and this is not Muggsy Bogues, I think. Might be. I guess I'd never asked Muggsy in the Discord, a regular Discord user, always a good question asker, if it is in fact Muggsy Bogues. I don't think it is. The question is there a recently fired or about to be fired NBA ready head coach that if they become available, you would have no problem pushing Darko aside for the 2025-26 season? It's kind of a ghoulish question from our pal Muggsy, but I get it. This is an NBA. The NBA is business and mean and ghoulish, and that's how things work. I think it's a pretty hard no for me, honestly. I don't think coaches change team situations enough in like 90% of cases to really go and make a move like this. When Darko has frankly done nothing but do exactly what he was asked to do when he came in. His edict when he was hired was figure out the development stuff, get us back on track as a team that takes players and makes them into better players. And they've done that. They've seen a lot of really encouraging steps forward from guys they've drafted, guys they brought in as second draft guys, guys who were already in house when they were acquired, guys they've traded for and they've changed the games of on the fly. Like it's pretty awesome to see the Raptors get back to the roots like this. And I think Darko and his staff deserve a lot of credit for that. Like they very clearly have development on the brain and they're very good at it. Darko has always been very good at it. This has always been a thing he's been renowned for. And to me, there is no reason to pull the chute on what Darko's helping to build right now because some other coach might become available. And like, who are the coaches that might get fired this season? I mean, if we're going to go through the list, Jason Kidd, nah, I'm good, man. All set there. we're peachy over here, not having Jason Kidd be the head coach of the Toronto Raptors. I know Mike Brown just got let go. Look, the Kings are playing well since they got rid of Mike Brown. Everyone kind of seemed to maybe be over Mike Brown by the end. I'm not itching to go down that road, really. If you're looking at other guys who might get let go, I mean, does Billy Donovan get let go? Maybe. Billy Donovan's a good coach, obviously, but he's not like a total game changer to me to the point that you just move on from Darko to go bring him in. Also weirdness because they're pals from OKC, and I don't think Billy Donovan's going to be like, yeah, give me the job that you just fired Darko for. Like, that seems strange. Otherwise, yeah, there's not really Nick Nurse, you go down that road again if you really want. I'm all set, but if you want to whip the team into gear and go win games next year and maximize every single minute, maybe Nick Nurse is your guy in a bit of a reunion tour. Bring the guitar back, baby. Please do not bring the guitar back, baby. Beyond that, I mean, Mike Budenholzer, I don't think he's getting let go with the Suns, and I think, that's not really a road you got to go down again. Maybe the Suns fire him. I don't know. But beyond that, like Chris Finch with the Wolves, they've been a little disappointing. I think that's way more front office related than Chris Finch related. He's a good coach. There's just, again, I think in most cases, obviously there's the JB Bickerstaff over Monty Williams bump, right? A situation like that where it just clearly wasn't working with Monty Williams. He didn't want to be there. Everyone hated him. He hated everyone. It just was not a good copacetic environment. You bring in JB Bickerstaff, who's just like a good coach, a guy who gets a lot out of his guys, and you see that gigantic switch, right? The gigantic leap. That's one of those 10% of cases where coaches really matter. The other end of things is like Eric Spoelstra is a genius wizard who gets way more out of his teams than he has any right to do. Sure, if Eric Spoelstra were available, sorry, Darko, let's go make a pursuit of Eric Spoelstra like he's Shohei Ohtani. I'm all for that. Eric Spoelstra is not going to be available. And if he were, I doubt he's coming to the Raptors on the heels of 3 straight seasons out of the playoffs. So, yeah, I think the idea of moving on from Darko is premature. I don't think it really makes a lot of sense. And again, I think he's just done the job he was asked to do pretty darn well and has very much earned the right to coach this team as it, in theory, moves into the next phase of things, right? If they end up being a team that can't get over the hump because they, have playoff tactical issues or whatever, then sure, you talk about it then. But until then, I think he's earned every right to go and prove that he can be the guy to coach this team into the next era of whatever it is they're going to be. Last question here comes from Ejabno, who I believe is like half Hornets fan in the Locked On Raptors Discord. Apologies if I am incorrectly labeling you a Hornets fan. I really apologize because I can't think of. I know there are a couple in the Discord who like to hang out because they want to talk about a team that isn't the Hornets. But either way, the question from Ejabno is: with Charlotte reportedly considering the possibility of moving LaMelo Ball, should Toronto be in on the sweepstakes? No, thank you. I'm all set. Look, LaMelo Ball, obviously a very talented basketball player. And I know I'm going to make all the Zoomers mad with this rant I'm about to go on because for some reason, and I know I coach 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds at a school. They all love LaMelo Ball. I don't understand why. They don't have League Pass. They don't have Hornets games on TV all the time, because why would they be watching Hornets games? They're 11, 12, and 13 years old. They have other things going on. I don't understand the fascination with LaMelo Ball, but I do understand when I watch him, I want to poke my eyes out. And this is like, I'm going to sound mean here because guys are capable of change. You're not always just going to be the guy you are when you're 22 years old or whatever. If everyone was who they were at 22, the world would be hell. Look, the world is hell already. It would be more hell if everyone was just who they were when they were 22. You could argue some of the worst people alive are just who they were when they were 22 and have never changed. And maybe that's a big problem for why the world is hell. We can put a pin in that one for now. But LaMelo Ball, whenever I watch him play basketball, I think two things. Wow, this guy's talented. And wow, talent sure ain't everything, because he plays such a joyless style of basketball. I get it. When the shots are going in and he's heaving up ridiculous, ill-advised threes and they fall, it looks cool. It looks rad. Whatever. It's TikTok friendly. Cool. God, I sound so old right now. Whatever. Don't care. But when you watch him play, it just, there's nothing team basketball conducive going on whatsoever. He is not a lead guard. He is a guard who's out there while other guys watch him play basketball. That's the extent of watching Charlotte Hornets basketball. It's not fun. I've watched maybe 5 or 6 Hornets games all year because I tune in and I'm just like, why would anyone watch this? What's going on here? Our pals Doug and Walker at Locked On Hornets, like, send them a bouquet of flowers, because they have to watch LaMelo Ball either walk up and just have like no concept of like time, score, situation, what's needed from his team on a given possession. He'll just dance around. I mean, this happened in games the Raptors have played against the Hornets this year, where like close game or like the Hornets making a run, and then he just like nukes it with the dumbest 30-foot heave you've ever seen. And it's just like, really, man? Really? I thought Charles Lee was supposed to fix all this. I thought Charles Lee was the guy who was going to get everything sorted out that down there in Charlotte, fix the culture and all of that. But then you watch LaMelo, and again, when he's like off the ball, he'll pass to somebody, and then his like favorite move is just stand on the wing 35 feet from the basket, not moving, with his hands up, waiting for the ball to come back, as everyone else on the Hornets just stands around stagnant. I remember watching that game. It was like the only game on TV the night after the All-Star break. I think it was a Wednesday night game, and the Hornets beat the Lakers, and everyone was like, oh, look at LaMelo with the winner. But that entire game was an exercise in watching just like the most ugly, nasty, no good basketball you've ever seen, where it's just LaMelo again standing and waiting for the ball back. They were just like entry pass to Mark Williams, 4 guys stand around doing nothing. There's just not really seemingly any urgency from LaMelo Ball to be a particularly effective or winning forward basketball player. And it's not like his numbers are suggesting that there's some really excellent, positive basketball player lying under the hood here that's been affected by poor context. He feels like the guy who's created the poor context in Charlotte. He's someone who has always been a bad rim pressure player, never gets to the rim very much. He's at 21% rim frequency this season per clean the glass. That's not very good for a lead guard, especially a 6'7" guy who in theory can blow by guys and get downhill and has speed. He just is uninterested. He takes more than half of his shots from 3. Most of them are pull-ups. A lot of them are super ill-advised. He's not a good catch-and-shoot three-point shooter, just 33% on 4 attempts a game this season, or 4.5. Like, he takes a lot of threes. Again, over 50% of his shots come from deep. He's super three-point dependent, and he's just someone who, he doesn't even finish at the rim. His career best shooting percentage at the rim is 56%. He's ostensibly supposed to be a lead guard who's 6'7". You can't be shooting 56% as a career high from the rim if that's what you are as a player. He's a negative defensive player. And so, no, I do not think the Toronto Raptors, if LaMelo Ball is available, should be going in to try to get him. I think the assets it'll cost, the risk that comes with him, again, totally possible. And if it happens, I'll eat all kinds of crow. If he were to come to the Raptors and figure things out, we'll happily be wrong. But I'll go down with the ship thinking that's just not a good idea, because there's just so much distance between the player LaMelo Ball is now and the player he'd have to be to totally change the narrative on him and make him into a guy who's going to drive winning basketball. And I think the risk there is too much for the Raptors, who right now, yes, there's risk with what they have built, and there's uncertainty, and there's perhaps a ceiling built into what they have, almost certainly a ceiling, pending what they get in the draft this year. But to me, it's not worth potentially raising that ceiling and sort of the super duper high end outcome of what could happen if you got LaMelo Ball and he got himself figured out. Like, I don't think that is likely enough or high ceiling enough to be worth foregoing all the flexibility the Raptors currently have. They have all their picks available. You won't have all your picks if you trade for LaMelo Ball. And then you'll be sitting there with a team where you're kind of locked in, right? It's Ball, it's Ingram, it's Scotty. Quickly's probably on the way out if that's a deal, like just for salary matching and position stuff and all of that. Who knows what else goes out the door too. Your picks are compromised. And then that's just kind of your team. And if LaMelo Ball doesn't figure it out, you are in the tubes for years and years and years to come, watching some of the least serious basketball that's ever been played on an NBA floor. I just don't see it. And maybe I'm a hater. I don't really care. I just think, like, sometimes you just got to call it the way you see it. And the way I see it with LaMelo Ball is he is someone the Raptors should be staying all kinds of distance away from. There will be other guys who come up. He is not the guy for the Raptors to take their shot with. There will be a guy in the Locked On Raptors newsletter that I talk about who would be worth taking a shot, even if he's an unrealistic pie in the tie target. We will get into that in the mailbag. Pie in the tie? Pie in the sky. Yeah, I'm good at words. That's going to do it. Thank you. Again, newsletter dropping later with some more mailbag questions answered. You can follow, subscribe, rate, review. We'll be back tomorrow. Vivek Jacob will be along this week as well. He's back Thursday. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Raptors Magic, see if the Raptors can hang on and not blow a fourth quarter 20-point lead again. That'd be great. And we'll talk all about what goes down in Orlando tonight. Big V will be back. We got draft stuff, of course. We'll continue on throughout the year, a week, and all that good stuff. Looking forward to it as the Raptors embark upon this stretch of schedule against all of the worst teams you've ever seen. Either way, thank you so much for rocking with the show. We'll talk to you on Wednesday. Another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. 2 in a row, or Secaucus? I don't know. I'm going to say it's in until proven otherwise.